Welcome back to Case Studies. I'm here with my friend, Taysom Hill. It's been a little while to put this together, and I've been looking forward to this for a long time for a couple of reasons. The first is your story from high school to college to professional sports is so unique. I think it's a completely unique track. And I think people who haven't heard it, they would look at it from the end and they would say, that's kind of a charmed life. You know, you kind of star in high school, star in college, you know, had a great NFL career. But I think when you get into the weeds, tremendous amount of adversity along the way. And so I want to get into that. And the other one is I want to get into the business side of Taysom Hill and kind of that other aspect of your life that I don't think people understand, but it's actually like one of your superpowers is this, like you come from very strong finance background, you know, through a very good, you know, program in college and, you know, have experience on that side of it that I think is interesting to go dive into on how you think about that too. So anyway, welcome, brother.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me. You can always make something sound a lot better and glamorous than it is. I don't know.
I think you have a beautiful story. Like I really do. You know, I'm like insanely curious about what makes people tick.
Yeah.
What drives people. And you're really driven and always have been. And so there's a couple stories that I know that I want to get into that I think are like, there's a lot of gold to dig into. But talk to me about growing up. Talk to me like what life was like growing up for Taysom Hill.
I mean, I grew up in Pocatello, Idaho, small town, right? I think a lot of, you know, you read the book Outliers, and that was kind of me. Like I grew up as the youngest of 4 kids. My parents lived in a small town, grew up on farms. Like my dad was just the hardest working guy I've ever been around, you know? And so that's what I saw. And then I saw 2 older brothers go play college sports, you know? And then I had an older sister that went and played college sports, went and played college basketball. And so they were 9, 6, and 3 years older than me. And so ever since I was a little kid, like I was chasing them. Like I was playing with their friends, and I was always having to like try harder to make up for being younger and small and, you know, all that stuff. And so I look at like my childhood, and I was just put in this situation to like grind to kind of be successful.
Yeah.
Growing up in an athletic family. And, you know,
were your parents athletes? Like they had to have been athletic. Like you don't mint 3 or 4 college athletes if you're not.
They were. They just had different opportunities, you know? Like my dad grew up in an environment where it was like more important to do chores on the farm than anything else. You know, so that stuff just really wasn't pushed, but he was a good high school athlete, but you know, he wasn't aware of what. But
did they love it the same? Like, did they love it the same as like your siblings loved it? Like,
I think so. You know, like I look at my dad, and my dad had to sacrifice a lot more to do sports than I ever did. You know, because he had a checklist of chores he had to do around the house, and that's like that. You had to get that done.
Yeah.
And so if he was going to do that and play sports, he would just wake up extra early. You know, take care of his chores, go to school so he could stay late and do that, you know? So he was definitely motivated and like driven that way.
Yeah.
He just didn't have the same opportunities.
And mom, same way?
I did. Mom was the same way. I mean, she didn't grow up on a farm, you know, she grew up on a farm, but with different responsibilities, I would say, you know? So she didn't have like she wasn't out milking cows and doing stuff like that. But
it's fascinating. I think about how much your parents influence you.
It's everything.
And like my mom, one of 14 kids from Star Valley, Wyoming, and she's number 13 of 14.
Wow. So
grew up on a farm, but thrift is just Like I've never not seen my mom shop at the DI ever, ever to this day. Like she just does not spend. She's so thrifty, but it was how she was raised.
Yeah.
My dad, one of 2 kids, grew up in Logan, which was, small town, but big city compared to where my mom came from.
Sure. Yeah.
And had a dad and a mom that were kind of dreamers. And I think about myself and like we worked. Other kids growing up, they didn't have chores. We worked every day. So it was like, I still remember I'd have my buddies come over to my house, Stevenson and these guys come over to my house and be like, hey, we got chores to do, fellas. Like, and I'd get my friends to come help me do my job so that we could all go play together because they didn't have jobs, but like it was just part of it. And so I think about like, even from my life, how much having my mom that was like hardcore work and work was just who you are. But then having a dad that like was a dreamer and, kind of like pushed me to dream bigger than, my circumstance. But that's fascinating thinking about you. Cause I was saying, I had 3 older brothers that played sports, older sister so all I thought about from the day I was born, I worship these guys, it's like, that's what I want to do when I get older.
Yeah.
And you just had that. You were the baby.
I had that. And I also I've had this conversation with my parents a lot where, they grew up a certain way. And when they were raising their kids, it was like they could look at something and learn from it, And so as a kid, they created as many opportunities for me as they could.
That's so cool.
Yeah. And so that is one of the more valuable lessons that I've ever learned from my parents, not because of anything they ever told me, but as I've learned their story and then I look at how I was raised, I was like, you guys were able to.
They weren't saying you have to do what I did.
No.
They were kind of saying there's a better way.
That's right.
Yeah.
And I think that is so admirable, and I think it's easy in those situations to use it as an excuse. Yeah. Rather than like, hey, I think that there's a better way.
Yeah. And so you go through junior high, you go through high school, and you were a standout. Like you were a star in high school. When was it that you knew like I could be really good?
I think there was a lot of expectation by the time I got to high school,
So you were tearing it up when you were younger.
Well, yes, I was, not to whatever, but more because of my siblings.
Just because they were stars.
They were stars. So by the time I got there, it was like, okay, Jordan was a first team all-state football player, was going to Arizona State. My brother Dex was first team, quarterback. My sister was a stud basketball player. So by the time I got there, I walked into the weight room and
it was time.
My coach was like, hey, I've been waiting for you, and the expectation is high, so what
a testament to your older siblings though.
Yeah.
That they set the bar high.
No, I loved it. Yeah. And I think that there is we talk about pressure and obviously pressure can be a bad thing, and expectation. I think that sometimes those can be a negative thing, but I think a little expectation and a little pressure, an expectation to be a hill when I got to high school and have an expectation of how hard I was going to work and, I think that was a good thing.
Yeah. It was your identity.
Yeah.
It was just, this is who
and it was
we are.
this is what we do, So look, I had a great time in high school. I loved every second of my time in high school. I
played 3 sports.
I played 3 sports, football, basketball, and I ran track.
Yeah.
With the mindset to get faster for football.
Yeah.
But I loved all of it. I would say it was all really good, and I never felt like the expectation and pressure was too much for me. I thought it was healthy for me.
And outdoors was something that's still just in your bones, that like a passion. Share it with your brother, share it with your dad.
Yeah, there was I mean, you can't grow up in Idaho and not be outdoors, you know?
Yeah.
So I grew up hunting, fishing. Like most people are like going down to Arizona or Disneyland. And I guess we did Disneyland growing up, but it was like we were going camping.
You're going camping.
We had motorcycles, four-wheelers. That's like,
and to this day, that's still like
still
your favorite thing. Yeah.
That's still the thing. But it is an interesting thing. I'm such a big fan of sports for so many reasons and the lessons that it teaches you. I still remember as a high school athlete, and we kind of laugh and joke about this at the time, or like now, but I remember we were playing our crosstown rival school, and maybe you've seen this clip, I don't know, but there's a clip on YouTube called "TAYSOM'S Gets Rocked." It's literally like what it's called.
I actually have seen that.
Have you seen it?
The cheap shot you on
Yeah. So I remember like when I think about what was like a hard thing that I had to go through as a 17-year-old like athlete, right? That was a that was like a really hard time for me in the moment, you know, because I couldn't, as a 17-year-old, I couldn't understand why another grown man would want to hurt a 17-year-old kid that like I had committed to play for Stanford at the time. Like why he would want to hurt a 17-year-old kid that would like have the opportunity to go do something outside of Pocatello.
I mean, it was like the craziest cheap shot ever. I mean, it was like,
it was
wild.
It was wild. It was a really hard thing. I haven't really talked a ton about it, you know, truthfully, but I remember after the game, like I obviously cared about winning that game, but I just wanted it to be over so bad, truthfully. And,
it affected you.
Yeah, it was a tough time for me. I just couldn't understand why somebody would want to do that.
Yeah.
You know? And I think I'd had so many positive experience playing sports. I'd had so many positive like conversations and like so much excitement with my friends and my family and buddies talking about where we wanted, like where I was going to go to college and play. And then all of a sudden, like, there's a coach that wants to take that from me.
Yeah.
Like, wants to hurt me.
Because those different sporting experiences are just different. Like, high school sports are different than college sports.
Yeah. And
college sports are different than professional sport. Like, there's a different family. There's a different camaraderie. There's, like, and high school sports, it's just your brothers. It's like your best friends and you know what I mean? So that you take like a lot of innocence, if you would, you know, at that point. And maybe it's like a loss of innocence where you're like,
I don't know what it was. I really don't know what it was. But, you know, that was kind of it's changed my perspective, you know, a little bit. Like I have two little boys, you know, that aren't quite old enough to be involved in team sports right now. But I have such a different perspective as I think about sports and how it's affected my life, you know, the foundation and the things that I learned as a result of it. I think it is so important to have good coaches at every level. Right? Because I was thinking about this the other day, like, you know, when you ask a kid, like, what's their favorite subject in school? You know, and most young kids, especially young boys with a ton of energy, right? It's like, oh, I love recess. You know, I love being able, like, when school's over, I get to go play football. I get to go play basketball, like whatever that is. Right. And so when you think about the platform that a coach has, right, to change and help mold a young person, right, at a very malleable age.
Yep.
That is a very like important role that these, you know, parents and coaches have that teachers don't have, right? Yep. Like no one's going to look at it. I don't want to say no one, right? Because there have been teachers in my life that have been, you know, really impactful, but not the same as a coach, because I didn't love math like I love sports. Yeah. You know? So I would say that has been the lesson learned, you know, of how important it is
good coaches
to have good coaches.
And it's crazy how influential those coaches are at
for sure
those age, specifically that age, you know, like you're so moldable. You know what I mean? I think even like that play, you go to it and it's like, that kid's not doing that. Like that kid's not deciding.
He was told to do that.
He was like specifically like
by someone you're supposed to look up to,
a grown man,
and love.
Yeah,
you know,
for
and
sure.
Like, you know. Anyways, I would say that as I think about my high school experience, like it was all so positive.
Loved it.
You know, going through that is one thing that, you know, I still can't really get my head around, truthfully.
Talk to me about Stanford. Like, why Stanford?
You know, I think growing up in Pocatello, I felt a little social pressure maybe to like go to a really prestigious university.
Yeah.
And I think maybe I got caught up in that a little bit. And I don't think it was the wrong decision. I think it was the right decision at the time.
Yeah.
You know, and
you loved Harbaugh.
I loved Harbaugh. Jim had recruited me, and like he was truthfully like my guy. He had a vision for me. Like this is what we were gonna do, and you know, like he recruited me really hard, and I like still to this day, like I love Jim.
We were talking about that the other day when I was working at Vivint.
Oh, that's right.
And this is later. This is you went on your mission, and you know,
I was at BYU,
starring at BYU, starting quarterback. And Harbaugh came. He was with the 49ers, and he made the call to you to come to the event just to see you.
Yeah.
And you're like, wow, that's a special coach. When you're like, I'm not done with you because recruiting's over. Like I cared about you as a person.
Yeah.
I always thought that was like a really like cool gesture.
Such a cool thing. And I felt that from day one, you know, that he was that way. And I still remember you and I have talked about this before, but I don't want to jump the gun, I guess, but getting to BYU, and you know, Jim was someone that kind of stayed connected and stayed in my life, and you know that we have a good relationship and friendship, and has been like really influential.
Yeah. So decide Stanford, tear it up in high school, go on a mission. Harbaugh goes to the 49ers. Was that the catalyst? Was that the big thing? If you would have stayed, you think still Stanford?
Yeah. If Jim was there, I still would have gone to Stanford. You know, and I think at that time, you know, my mission president was like the coolest dude ever, and he allowed me to. I was fielding conversations or phone calls from my parents and Coach Shaw
to go sort it out,
Coach Anderson, and then kind of opened up this like recruitment process all over again as a missionary. Because
like today, it's just you hop in the transfer pool and you bounce, but at that point, it wasn't that way. Like at that point,
once you sign, you're there.
You're there.
If you transfer, you have to sit out a year.
But the X factor was you were on your mission, so you were actually sitting out anyway. So you're kind of a free agent again.
Yeah, exactly. I was, because when you sign your national letter of intent, at least back then, it was binding for 18 months.
Yeah,
and after that 18-month period, then you're
free agent again.
You're free agent. Yeah, exactly. And so that time had passed. So now at this time, my parents are getting emails. My coaches, high school coaches, were getting emails about it and whatnot. And, you know, I would say out of high school, I really narrowed it down to two schools, Stanford and BYU. Just, I felt like they were different. You know, I felt like I could go to Stanford and I could go get an education that felt like more than football.
Yeah.
And then I felt like that was going to be, you know, and I'm not naive. I know that, like football there's a shelf life to playing the sport, and that what's sustainable is going to get an education, going to get a trade, a skill set that you could go do for the rest of your life. And
remember, it was so fascinating when Harbaugh, he was talking about Stanford, and when he went there, they weren't very good. And they're not very good now.
Yeah.
But he talked about Stanford, and he basically just said the amount of people that we can recruit is very, very small.
Yeah.
Just because of grades. Like there's a tight group of people that can get in there. And when I got there, we were recruiting everybody, and we narrowed it down to a tiny group, but we got everybody. And they identified who could actually get in. And that was their pitch was you go sit down with them and you say, football might not be forever.
Yep.
But you will have a degree from Stanford. And he said, we just would get everybody. And I thought it was a fascinating insight in like, I'm a big fan of like strategy. And I was like, oh man, that's so insightful that, hey, like, let's not go broad. Let's go narrow, but let's play to our strengths. And Stanford is the strength. It's one of the biggest brands in the world. You know what I mean?
And I felt that coming out of high school, you know, but I also look, when I was making that decision, it was Stanford or BYU, you know, for the reasons that we talked about. And then as I looked at BYU, it was like, man, you have an opportunity to go like represent something far bigger than yourself, you know, and you get the opportunity to go be part of like something that means something to a lot of people. And you get to represent that, you know, and that meant a lot to me. You know, that was significant where I felt like that was more than just going to play football.
I mean, you can feel it. Like I'll go to the basketball games, you know, and I think it's different because me and you were friends outside of, you know, we're friends. And so there's not the starstruck, but you go to a basketball game and they put you up on the scoreboard and you can feel that you were a special part of that university. Like people, you know, you're emotionally connected to the success of the players, you know, and I think what you saw that you could go do, it worked. I mean, there's a love, you know, for all the great players at BYU, but it's bigger than I think most schools, just probably because of the church affiliation and just it's bigger than football.
I mean, that's what I'm referring to, right? I'm a man of faith. That means a lot to me. My relationship with God and Jesus Christ is means a lot to me, you know? And so as you look at BYU and what it represents, and then you have the opportunity to go be a starting quarterback there, like that meant a lot to me, you know? And I recognized how unique and how significant that opportunity was. And that felt like so much more than football. And that is really why it was Stanford or BYU, you know? So when Harbaugh left,
it tilted the scales. It
was like, okay, let's go, you know? And it's crazy how it worked out because I was coming home. I got released right before Christmas, December of 2011. And I remember a member of the church saw me in the LA airport as I just flew in from Sydney, had a layover. I still got my missionary badge on, everything, you know. And a member of the church grabs me, recognized me, and says, "Hey, can I buy you breakfast?" I said, "Sure." I got 2 hours to kill. So we sat and had breakfast. And he's on his phone and he gets this notification and he shows me the notification that Jake Heaps was transferring. It just hit the news. You know, this
from
was
Washington, right? Was that
no, he was at BYU.
Oh, he was transferring out.
He was transferring out. You know, so when I made this transition, I was going to go to BYU. It was like, hey, what's the opportunity?
Can I play?
Going to look like?
Yeah.
Right. And then I'm flying home from my mission. I'm going to get released later that night. And a member of the church shows me his phone as the news broke that, like, you know, Jake Heaps, who was a sophomore at the time,
was transferring.
And
it was kind of game on from day one, wasn't it? Like, when you showed up, like,
at that point, Riley Nelson was a senior, you know, and he had earned that spot. And, you know, so I came in as a freshman and was just trying to learn everything I could, just trying to knock the rust off and get back in shape and, you know, do all that. And I'm a weight room guy. Like, I love to work out and stuff. And so I always loved to do that, but I also felt like that gave me some credibility amongst my peers and my teammates.
This is my personal experience. So when we met, it was COVID.
Yeah.
And the only reason we met, Chad Lewis, it was COVID and all the gyms shut down. The university shut down everything. And we had like a gym at my house. And Chad Lewis was my neighbor. And you come over to the house and we worked out that summer. And I remember, like, I was you're kind of proud about how strong I was. As I was lifting, I was squatting the most I'd ever squatted. And it was the first time, all right, I think you did double, maybe not double, but almost double on I think it was 5 or 5.5 plates, and you're just repping it. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, like this, so I think about you and I think about like a Tim Tebow. Tim Tebow came into Florida as a freshman quarterback and was the strongest guy on the team. But you had to have been in that range where you were as strong as anybody on the team as a freshman.
I mean, there were some lifts, like my best lift is by far a squat, So if you're talking about a squat, then
no one was lifting more.
There was a couple guys that I would squat with. I think me and T-John Caroma, we were there was a couple guys like all.
But what is that number? Like, what is that number as a freshman that you're squatting
in college?
Yeah.
Shoot, I don't even know. I mean, I was hitting probably north of 500 pounds as a freshman. I don't know.
I mean, there's just something like there's something about the weight room.
No, you get cred. And I honestly, I think that is important. I like this last year, I just hit a PR on the squat bar that we did it like, week 11, week 12 of the NFL season last year. Like it was a Wednesday. We had a game Sunday and I was feeling good, and me and my strength coach are super close.
We're gonna do it.
Yeah, we were kind of looking at each other like, I feel pretty good today, and so we hit like 650 or
Holy
something
smokes.
like that halfway through a NFL season.
And everybody's just like, oh man.
But I think that stuff is important. And as I look at my freshman year, like I had a few opportunities early in that season. Because like I came
because of the weight room
and I worked my tail off.
Yeah.
And I think because of that, like I tried to run with the fastest guys. Like I remember our conditioning tests were set up with like group A, B, C all the way down. And I made sure I was running with the A group, and I made sure I was lifting with our linemen, stuff like that. And, I don't think there was any plan for me to play as a freshman when I first got there. And Brandon Doman put in like this wildcat stuff for me.
For you. Yep.
Still, my first play as a college athlete was like a 4th and 1. We're playing Washington State. And this wildcat package was like, we had basically a menu of like 4 or 5 plays. And Brandon was like, hey, based on what they're doing, this is kind of what we like, this play for this and whatever. And
so you kind of run an option.
Gave me some flexibility with what we were doing. And it was my first play as a freshman college athlete in 4th and 1. And I call a play, and it was a little play fake. And I'm booting out and throw a touchdown to Kanye. And that was my first play.
That was it
in college.
That's how it started.
Then, Riley got banged up. He got banged up that game actually, and was fighting through it, and continued to fight, and he just needed some time to heal up, and so I guess it was week 3 or week 4 or something like that. I came in against Boise State. Finished that game, started the next 2, and then I got hurt against Utah State my freshman year and was out for the season after that.
You had season-ending injuries in 3 of the 5 years?
4.
4 of the 5.
4 of the 5, yeah.
Which is like, and they're all freak injuries. They're all different, right?
Yeah. Freshman year, I ripped my bicep femoris tendon off the bone of my hamstring. Sophomore year, made it through great. I played every game, was healthy, started every game. Junior year was a tough year because we were having a really good year that year. We were 4-0. I think we were ranked 18th in the country at the time, and then I blew out my knee. No, sorry, I broke my leg and tore the ligaments in my ankle as a junior. Rehab, senior year, I came back, week 1 playing Nebraska, popped the Liz Frank in my right foot, and then decided to take a medical, came back and played one more year. And I actually played when I started 12 games that year, or I guess 12 games. And I got hurt the last game of the season against Utah State, where I ripped the tricep tendon off the bone in my arm. So that was kind of my college career, you know?
So I want to dig into this because I think this matters a lot if somebody's like, what is Taysom about? So was it your first year when you got hurt when you decided I'm going to go into finance and I'm going to go compete, and you started competing in the classroom?
Yeah.
Tell me about, that story. Cause I remember hearing that and being like, I love everything about that story.
Yeah.
Where somebody from the outside could look at it and say, man, what a tragedy.
Yep.
And you found a way to like go find the good and to go still compete.
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and that is true. I have, my wife and I've talked a lot about this, and it sounds cheesy. I feel like when I say this out loud, but I always recognize that like I had been given a lot. When I was in high school, like I recognized that I grew up in a great family. I had this athletic ability, like I recognized all that these were like all, gifts. And that was really my mindset. And I think as a result of that, I felt like if you were to ask me what my biggest fear growing up was, it was like not finding success. That's what I would tell you, as cheesy as that sounds, that's the truth.
Yeah.
And so when I got hurt my freshman year, my motivation was like, okay, I got 3 more years to do this. Like I'm going to grind, I'm going to get through this. And then I would say my motivation, like I still remember having conversations with guys at BYU about like what I wanted to study. And I said, hey, I want to do something in the business school, and I really want to do finance. And there were people like, okay.
Because to give perspective, finance at BYU is like really tough to get into.
Yeah.
And very demanding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so they kind of looked at me like, that's going to be hard to do, like while playing football.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, like tell me how to get it done, And so sophomore year, I took all the prereqs, all that stuff. And I got into the business school. And then my junior year, I already alluded to, like we were having a really good year as a team. And then I got hurt week 5, and it was devastating.
Crushed you.
Yeah, it was a tough one. I was arguably having my best, 4 or 5 games that I've ever had, and we were playing really well as a team, team captain, like all that stuff, right? And then all of a sudden, like all that goes to just nothing. It's over.
Yeah.
Right. And the next week, I just had surgery, and I'm watching my team play, and I'm laid up on the couch, And so the conversation that you were alluding to earlier was from Jim Harbaugh. He was still at the Niners, and he called me and he said, hey, what's going on? How you doing? And I kind of opened up to him, and I was like, man, this is tough. And, to be honest, people ask me about, what like the physical rehab, like what is that like and how challenging is that? And the answer is always like, yes, that's tough, but the harder thing to me is the mental hoops that you jump through, and the mental like struggle of like playing, competing, like working all off season to have the opportunity to play in the season, and then seeing all that just go away.
Gone.
Was really hard. And so Jim called and we were kind of talking through some of this, and he goes, you know what, Taysom? He goes, dude, you and I are wired the same way. He goes, like, yes, you want to be playing football. You want to be competing on the football field. That's where you want like this competitive like drive that you have. That's where you want to channel it. He's like, but you can't do that right now. So go get in the classroom and go compete your butt off in the classroom. And I was like, you're right, dude. Okay. And so that kind of was like,
but what a homie.
A different,
even I've always liked Harbaugh.
Yeah.
But you hear these stories and it's like, this stuff no one hears.
Yeah.
Like,
that was really impactful.
The one-on-ones, and not like what does he have to gain at that point?
No, he had nothing.
I mean, he's a pro. He's coaching, head coach for the 49ers.
Yeah.
And you never played for him. You know what I mean? And anyway, that just as a side note from leadership, I'm like, that stuff fires me up.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's a great, and I think this is a lot about you too, right? Like you care a lot about relationships, and relationships mean something to you. And I think Jim was that way, where he had this relationship and he wanted to do what he could to help. So he called me, and fortunate, honestly, now I had time. It was starting the hardest year of my academic career. I was in the junior core of the finance program, where you were just drilled, you were in it. And that year, man, I went and competed my butt off, and did really well that year in the finance junior core, and did really well. But I also think that the mindset that I was talking about earlier, about not finding success, has kind of always been in the back of my mind, right? So there was never a question of giving up. It was okay, we're gonna grind, get through this, and figure out what's next.
But so again, these are just personal experiences. We're working out that summer, and I don't think you'd ever ridden a Peloton.
Yeah, I have.
And I was riding a Peloton every day. And so anyway, you hop on my Peloton, and you're right, you don't have your own account name, so you're riding in my account name. And I get a text from, I think you either told me or text, hey, I beat your personal record. And so I'm like, so I go back the next day, and I die on that Peloton the next day. And I beat your number. And then you beat it by a lot. And then you beat it by a lot again. And it's I didn't even try. But it was this unique insight that I got to your will to compete. And I admire it. It's one of the qualities that I admire the most about you, is just this relentless determination. It actually it helps me when I look back at your career, piece together how you got to where you got, because there's a lot of improbability to most people don't come back from one injury, and definitely not from 4. But it was something that you found a way to dig deep, and you found a way to go find a way back. So you go do that. You go compete in the classroom. Golf was an outlet too, right?
Golf for sure. Yeah. Golf.
Talk to me about golf and how that's
golf really started for me. I told you I played a little bit as a freshman, started 2 games before I got hurt. And we got a new staff that year, and Coach and I, and they named me the starter going into my sophomore year. So now I'm in the summer, just named the starter at BYU. And I already talked to you about how much that meant to me, having the opportunity to represent a university, church-owned university that really, really means a lot to me. And that hit me hard, I was feeling a lot of pressure.
The weight.
I was feeling all of it, getting asked to speak at all these different things, and, being a part of all, which I loved, but I realized that I needed some time for myself.
Some space.
I needed a little space, and I needed to find ways that I could get away and decompress. And I fell in love with golf that summer. I wasn't dating anybody, so I would go work out in the mornings, take care of all my responsibilities, and then I'd go play 36 holes a day.
You were in love with the game.
I was where you were at 2 years ago or 3 years ago is where I was in 2013, man. And I fell in love with it. And that competitive nature of most things I can, like, if I want to squat more, like I can just try harder, you know? And like golf was just like so frustrating.
Capture this animal. Yeah. It's like elusive.
So that's really where like my love for golf like originated. It was my out. It was my way of dealing with all of these new expectations.
But it's kind of turned into like a therapy, like a safe place for your whole career, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it really has. So as I look at my off seasons now in the NFL, I'm like, I want to make sure I'm doing something that like I feel like I'm progressing, you know, that I'm adding value to my life, to my family's life, and that sort of thing. But make sure that I'm taking care of myself as well. And, you know, golf is a big part of that.
It's a piece of it.
Yeah.
So you're going through it. I'd be remiss to not like ask you this question. Favorite BYU moment?
Oh man. I've had a lot of good moments. Look, I think I can't say anything other than like our Texas games. You know, my sophomore year when we beat Texas, the way that we beat Texas was special because, you know, we were coming off a tough loss and
no one saw that coming.
Nobody saw it coming. And I tell you what, man, like the things that were said to me after our opener against Virginia, and I did not play well, so like all good, you know. But it was wild.
Vindicating.
It was an eye-opening experience, you know. Never experienced anything like that. And you're playing at a big-time university, and there's crazy expectations, right? And like I got all of that after that game.
Yeah.
And then week 2 we played Texas.
Did it fire you up? Was it like
I mean, look, I don't ever take any of that stuff personally.
Yeah.
You know, like I still like I don't look, one of the greatest things that like Riley Nelson told me my freshman year was like he told me the story. I think John Beck had shared with him about like John was like saw an article, or maybe it was Riley. He was like an article somebody said writing how great he was, you know, and he was just like on cloud 9. And the next week they lost, and same guy, or you know,
he's
maybe
trash.
A different, it's like how bad I was. And Riley had shared that with me, and he was like, dude, just don't ever read anything that's said or written about you. And I was like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense, you know. And since then, like I really still to this day, I don't read, I don't look at anything. I'm, you know.
The Texas one was crazy because one, you know, you were coming off a tough Virginia experience, and then 2, like, I mean, Texas is Texas. It's one of the premier brands in college football.
I mean, I think they were a top 20 team at the time, you know. So that game sticks out in my mind. And then when going to a hostile environment and beating somebody the way that we beat Texas, like there's just nothing better. There's nothing better.
And you ran for like 200.
So the first game I rushed for over 200 yards, over 250 yards.
But threw for a lot of yards too, right?
I don't remember all the statistics, but like, I mean, everything here's the thing. Like we talk about these Texas games, and there are few games like in any level of sports, right? Where like a coach puts together a game plan, they're watching film and they're like, hey, I think this is going to work. This is what we're going to do. There's very few times where like everything works.
Did you just catch them by surprise?
I don't know.
Did they just like not have the answer?
But I'm telling you, it was like those 2 games are 2 games where it was like everything worked, from the game plan to what they were putting in to how we were going to do it.
And is it just like flow state? Like, are you just like
complete flow state? Totally.
In the Matrix almost, like.
Totally. And it is funny. I haven't had a ton of moments like this, but I do remember that 2013 game at home. It was really the first time that I was on the bus. It was the first time that I'd really started to think about the game, you know, and playing the game out of my mind, where I was like, okay, on this play, this happens. I'm going to do this and that, you know.
Because that's a big part of your routine now.
It's a big part of my routine now. I remember driving to the game, And I just kind of got lost in thought as I was thinking about the game, and I was thinking about different plays and schemes that I was excited about. And I envisioned a particular play going a particular way, and we get to the game, and I'm telling you, it was exactly how I envisioned it.
Gosh.
And it was one of those moments where I was like, holy cow, like this worked exactly how we designed it, exactly how I saw it, and like here it is.
How special is that? I think about that dynamic too of playing the same team the year after.
Yep.
And the different, like they've got to be thinking about that all off season. So to do it twice, is like,
it was special. It was special, you know. So those two games for sure, you know, as I think about
what else. If you're thinking about one more, it's like, hey, this was special. This was college football.
You know, I think the time we played Houston in 2013, I think we set an NCAA record with the most plays ran offensively. And the reason why I think about that game was like it took everybody to win it. We had a 2-minute drive.
That was when no one could stop anybody, right?
Nobody could stop anybody. But that's what I love about the game is it was like, I think I threw 2 picks that game, you know, but our defense came up with multiple turnovers, you know, and it was just like, I think we ended up winning by like 2 points, but we scored 49, you know, and we scored with like a minute left in the game to go up. And then they had a 2-minute drive, you know, that started at like 50 seconds. And Alani Fua gets an interception that sealed the game. So it's like you could go back and look at that game, and it was like it took everybody. You could look at special teams plays, you could look at offensive plays, you could look at defensive plays, and you were like, that was a defining moment. That was a determining factor of winning this game. And it was one of those that like at the end of it, like offensively, we played like 116 snaps. Defensively, we were close to that. You know, they were no huddle, we were no huddle. And so everybody is just exhausted. Dead. You know? So that was one of those just all around team effort, like games that like we came out on top. That really sticks out.
Talk to me about the decision to come back your senior year. Because I know that there was a lot going on. You know, you had been hurt. You had Harbaugh that was at Michigan. You know, that was the factor. Bronco was at Virginia.
Yep.
You know, there was a lot of stuff that, you know, could have taken you away from BYU. Talk to me about kind of how you thought about that decision. And
yeah, I think I didn't want to leave BYU, right? But I just missed that entire last season, and I was hurt, and I didn't know. We just got a new staff, right? Bronco just left, got a new offensive staff, new scheme. Ty Detmer was coming in, and Tanner Mangum had just played as a freshman, you know. And I know that the university and the coaches and everyone was excited about getting Tanner there, and so I had obviously relationships with Jim, who was now at Michigan. I still had relationships at Stanford, and obviously had relationships at Virginia. And so I think in all of this was how can I make football work for me? And so as I started to have these conversations, it was like, can I get into your business program?
Yeah.
Right. As I was talking to Stanford, I was like, hey, can I leverage football
can I do an MBA?
To get into your MBA program? You know?
Yeah.
You know, I looked at Michigan. Michigan was a top 20 program.
Great
Virginia, same thing, you know? So the conversations I started to have was, can I get into your MBA program?
Yeah.
You know? And then ultimately, like I said, look, I didn't want to leave BYU, but I have no problems. Like if BYU was like, hey, we're going to move on, you know, like you've had some 4 years.
Like there was some noise on Twitter. There was some noise, you know, you'd been hurt. 3 or 4 years, you know, you got Tanner, a freshman quarterback that came in and played and had some success.
Yep.
And so what was ultimate, like when was it like, hey, I'm coming?
Well, I think, you know, I'd had a lot of conversations with Kalani, and I'd had a lot of conversations with Ty. And I think ultimately, like, I loved BYU, and like BYU felt like home, and I didn't want to go anywhere else, you know, and I didn't want to feel like BYU was not home.
Yeah.
You know, because they also knew that like I had one year left.
This is it. This is how you're gonna like,
and I
finish.
I wanted to finish
with
BYU. Like, that was my program, that was my school. Like, that's how I wanted it to finish.
So we had great senior season. We were talking about this the other day. You're announcing the NFL draft in what, a couple weeks?
Yeah, end of April.
Yeah. But
April.
you never got drafted.
No.
So it's kind of a unique experience where you're getting up and you're calling these kids up, you know, but you never had that experience. You know, I think you came into that, you put in the work that off season. Like, I remember you showing up and I was like, who is that? Like, you were like completely grizzled. Like, you had leaned down. You were like, you were in kind of peak shape by the time that season started.
That was look, that was an interesting year for me as well, because I think Emily and I had so many conversations, right? Like, hey, like, what are we doing? Are we just like the only ones that can't see the writing on the wall here? Like, I just ripped my tricep tendon off the bone. I just had surgery, you know? I was working at a family office at the time.
Yeah.
Like, the previous year, I had flown out to New York. I'd met with guys at Goldman. I flew to Dallas and met with other investment banks.
I mean, you had a track. Like, you had done the right internships with Pelion. And had worked with.
I'd worked at Pelion for 3-4 years, like, through my injuries, like, and I had job offers, you know? And as I mentioned earlier, it was like, dude, football is not sustainable. Like, whether it's right now or whether it's, you know, whenever, like, it's going to come to an end. And, you know, Emily and I were like, dude, like, are we the only ones that are like, and here's the other thing. I was talking to agents like during my senior year, last game of the season, I ripped my tricep tendon off the bone. All of a sudden it's like,
they stopped calling.
Oh, hey, we don't have any money for you anymore. You know, like, yeah, I'm sorry, man. Like, this, we're a fool, you know.
No one was betting on you anymore.
No, there was, you know, look, we signed with an agency, and we made it work, but it was one of those things that Emily and I were like, I don't ever want to look back at this and wonder what if, you know. And so I rehabbed my elbow. I trained for pro day, and I was working at a family office all at the same time, you know, because I didn't want to feel like I was only doing one thing.
You were kind of multi-tracking it.
I was doing it all, because I didn't want to like not make it in the NFL. And then all of a sudden I'm like, okay, now I'm starting from ground zero. So, but yeah, we grinded that off season. I felt like I was, ahead of schedule in my rehab and stuff. So initially it was like, hey, I don't think I'll be able to do anything at pro day. And then, you know, we kind of rehabbed and worked really hard and got to a point where we're like, hey, we can do some stuff.
We could actually go.
And so I didn't do everything, but, you know, I ran the 40, did a few other things.
And ran it
through,
like scored well, right?
I ran really well. And then like all of a sudden it was like, okay, we're going to get an opportunity. You know, so I didn't get drafted. There were some teams that were calling initially that were like, hey, we really like you. There's one other quarterback that we like ahead of you, but we don't think we're going to be able to get you. So, you know, we think we'll probably draft you on the second or third day, you know? And then obviously like nothing ever happened.
Yeah. Did it bum you out?
Yeah. Of course, you know, I didn't go into it with any like expectation of getting drafted. I was like, dude, I'm 26, you know, I have 4 season-ending injuries. Like, I'm barely going to be healthy enough to go do OTAs, you know? So like, I had a lot of things stacked against me. So I think in all of this, like, I just wanted an opportunity.
You wanted to see.
And I didn't want to wonder the what if. I was like, let's get rid of all of that.
Yeah.
So actually, once you get to the later rounds, I think it's actually better
to sign as a free agent.
To sign as an undrafted free agent. You get to choose the team you go to, and you technically get to free agency a year earlier than you do as a drafted player.
Wow.
So it worked out really well. I signed to go to Green Bay, and they were like, hey, we want you to come and compete with our third string guy right now. And, we'll see what happens. We kept 3 on our active roster last year, and like, that's our plan for you. I said, okay. So I went up to Green Bay. I grinded to learn that offense, grinded to learn that system. And got to a point where like my quarterback coach was like, hey, dude, I'm not just going to throw you out there until I feel like you're ready. Basically like this is a tough system to pick up. And like, if you don't know it, it's going to be really tough.
Get chewed up.
Yeah. So I was like, fair, dude. And then like a week into OTAs, he's like, hey, go take these, and it was just like little skelly reps. But I remember if you talk to anybody in the NFL, if you talk to coaches, like they'll always talk about this moment. They're like, have you had your moment yet? Have you had a moment where it's like you belong here? Because for so long, it's the NFL, right? This is the end goal that is like the best of the best. Like that's where everyone's always trying to get to. And
probably like a bit of a fantasy, like
totally
kind of like untouchable place.
Totally. And truthfully, like growing up in Pocatello, Idaho, like there was like some insecurity around being from Pocatello. Can I
go to the...
Yeah. And knowing that like, there haven't been a ton of guys come out of here, and everyone's talking about the guys that are coming out of California and Texas and Florida and so forth. And look, I remember that day I finally got an opportunity. I remember the exact ball. I can picture it. I threw a seam ball in a tight window, and it was a good throw. And I was like,
I can do this.
I can do this. Like that was the first moment I had as a rookie in the NFL where I was like, I can do this. And I ended up like having a really good preseason. I had a really good camp in Green Bay that year. And at the end of the training camp, we're figuring out our 53-man roster. And it was, the way it works is like, you have to have your roster finalized by a certain date at a certain time. So if you're a bubble guy, you're just like waiting your phone to get a call, like, hey, can you come see us? Like you're getting released. And I still remember I'm in Green Bay. I'm driving. I called my wife because it was like 10, 15 minutes till the time that like our 53-man roster had to be submitted. I called Emily and I was like, babe, I haven't gotten called. Like we made it. I'm driving back to the hotel. Like we're like figuring out plans, like, hey, when are you going to come out here? Like, blah, blah, blah. Just as I make that phone call, I get a call. Hey, can you come see us? And I ended up getting released that day. I sat with Coach McCarthy for like an hour talking about my camp and, hey, you played well enough to deserve like a roster spot, but we just had injuries at different spots that we have to carry more defensive guys than what we were
So they
expecting.
didn't carry 3 quarterbacks.
They didn't carry 3 quarterbacks. So he was like, look, I promise you'll be on the active roster at some point this year. Stick with us, sign no practice squad. Like this is a good thing. Like I promise. So it's like, okay, like I'm a little bit disappointed, but as an undrafted guy, you're kind of like, all right, like I can continue to grind through this. And then Sunday morning. So what happens when you're released as a on your rookie deal, you get thrown to what's called a claim list, a waiver wire. And then it becomes like another draft where there's an order on the ability of teams to claim guys off the waiver wire. And
but if they claim you, they have to put you on the roster, right?
That's right. That's right. But if they claim you, it's like I got traded. Like I don't have any say.
You're done.
I'm just wherever, So I go into the facility Sunday morning. They're going to assign me to the practice squad. And then one of their player personnel guys came down and was like, dude, you just got claimed by the New Orleans Saints.
And you told me a story one time, but you didn't have like any money at this point.
Any money?
Yeah. Like, you were like there was no money.
No, I mean, we
college kid.
Look, I was working full time, I'd already graduated through the finance program and was working in finance, and Emily was working full time. But yeah, I mean, dude, we were poor college students, like grinding through it. And, Emily was like, we were definitely not in a spot where Emily could just like go with me to Green Bay as I tried to make the team
working.
Here.
She's working so that you can go chase
That's right.
Yeah.
Anyways, Sean, the story was that we were looking for a practice squad receiver, and he's watching Max McCaffrey, Christian's brother, who I played all my preseason games with in Green Bay. And so all of a sudden, Sean's watching Max, and then he sees me throwing the ball to Max, and he's like, hey, who's this guy? And so then he pulled all of my, film clips and watched all my stuff, and then he claimed me. And that's how Sean found me. And, I found out I was claimed at, call it 11 a.m. on Sunday morning, and I was on a flight to New Orleans like 2 hours later. And then practiced on Monday.
And Emily's just at home, right?
Emily's at home.
So like you're like in Green Bay getting ready to sign.
Yeah.
And again, sign to the practice squad. Like you're hoping, to make it. And all of a sudden you're in New Orleans.
Yeah.
With kind of no context. You didn't know Sean.
No, I mean, I had no idea what I was doing,
And so talk to me about earning your way onto the field. Like, I think there's a theme of being a freshman at BYU and just coming in and working your guts out and finding a way onto the field. And you did that. I think if there's anything that I admire the most about you, from like a professional standpoint and watching your career, is the ability to do whatever it takes, create so much value for the organization that they just have to have you. And for you, it came through special teams.
Yep. Yeah. I think, as I go back to like my childhood, I just, like I'm fearful of like not finding success, right? And so that is like a motivating factor, and maybe that's like a little prideful. I don't know, but that stuff is important to me. And so when I got to New Orleans, it was like, I still remember our quarterback coach handed me the playbook, and he said, "Hey, bro, like we're getting ready for Minnesota. We were playing Minnesota week 1, and like we don't have a ton of time, so like good luck." I said, okay. And so I start grinding through trying to learn this playbook, and
which is completely different than Green Bay's,
it's
right?
completely
it's like
different. It's a different language. Yeah. I became very fortunate. Like Drew like let me in, man. I respect him, and like I think that's hard to do. And Drew like I would wake up early to be with him. He's in watching film. I figured out he would start watching film at 6 a.m. So I would start waking up early so I could be with him. I did.
He was your guy, right? He was your my model guy. Of like what it is to be a professional.
For sure. Everything he did, I did. I woke up early. I did every exercise that he did. I never one time did like a lifting program that our strength coach did. I was like, I'm doing what Drew's doing, and I saw how he prepared for games. I saw like, he would stay late to memorize the game plan. So I was staying late with him to memorize the game plan. And,
how much of a blessing is that? Like when you think everything. About like your career, like I think about Todd Peterson or an Alex Dunn for my career. Like they changed my life. I had this model of what it's like to be a professional. And for you, like Drew was that model.
Drew is that. And he's become like a brother to me, and I think that's that's a hard thing to do as a guy who had had as much success as he had at that point, to let
somebody in.
I'm 26-year-old like rookie that doesn't know anything, and he let me like come in and get
just
to know
see your
him.
potential.
And, I don't know. I think Drew and I have a lot of similarities, you know, and obviously we've become, you know, really close. We were teammates for 4 years, and like, you know, over the course of that 4 years, I
lit the world on fire. From
July to January, like our wives would always joke that we spend way more time with each other than we do
the spouses,
you know, with them. But we were in there at 6 together, and we would stay till 7, you know, and but yeah, it was everything. And then I fast forward to like when I did get an opportunity to start at quarterback, like I already knew what to do. So I did everything he did. I memorized the game plan. I went through every play on our call sheet, and I played the game out in my head. I was like, okay, what if this play gets called, and what if we get man? What if we're getting a zone pressure? Like, what if it's this? What if it's cover 2?
So
what if it's cover 3?
Preparation in the pros versus college, what's the difference?
It's not even close.
It's different.
It's honestly, like, I'm a little bit embarrassed about it.
About how much you put into
in the NFL. And that was all Drew. Like my like naive, like rookie 26-year-old self, like I showed up to New Orleans and I was like, okay, Drew's been playing in the league for 16 years. Like there's not a single defense that he hasn't seen. There's not a pressure that he hasn't played against. There's just like he's seen everything. And the dude prepared like no one I've ever been around. It was unbelievable. Lesson. It was unbelievable. And it was like a really, really humbling experience. You know, and I talked to players, I talked to like other people, right, about like what makes, or we talk about this idea about that work beats talent when talent doesn't work, right? Like this old philosophy.
Yeah.
And I'm like, and then you find these guys that are so unique. And I look at Drew and I'm like, here he had the skill set, but he had the work ethic.
But that's why he's a Hall of Famer.
Set.
You know,
and
what
now
I mean?
You get a Hall of Fame
like
guy.
That's Hall of Fame.
That's the Hall of Fame. You know, those guys. He is so special, man. And he did things. I would watch him play, and I'd be like, bro, how did you see that? You know, like how did you know that was coming?
So you got him taking you under your wing. But then you got on the field not as a quarterback.
Yeah.
I mean, he was the quarterback 4 years. You're not like moving him. Like he's like playing some of the best ball of his life.
Yeah, he was balling out. But so that year about I don't know if you're familiar. So there's 53 guys that make an active roster, but there's only 46 guys or 47 that get a jersey on game day. Right? So you have your game day active roster guys that are like in a jersey, and then there's these other guys that are on the active roster but that are in t-shirts and a hoodie, like in a hat, chewing sunflower seeds on the sidelines. And that was me for the first 10 weeks, I think, something like that. And then what happened was somebody had gotten hurt that was dressing on game day, that was like playing special teams. And so this is Sean. This is how Sean recounted it. He was like, well, okay. So they went and looked at our 53-man roster, like who hasn't been dressing, who's been on our inactive list. And he walks over to my card and he's like, okay, here's this guy he's 6'2", he's 230, and he ran a 4.4 at his pro day. Like, what about him?
He could play some special
And our special teams coach, Mike Westhoff, was like, let me have him. And so Wednesday I showed up just thinking it was a normal Wednesday, and they grabbed me and were like, hey, we're going to put you on some special teams today. Just no big deal. Like, don't think about it. Just come do this, And it started off as like, hey, come be like on scout team, special teams for us. Like, this is all you have to do. I said, okay. And, I do remember like thinking as I was having these conversations with some of the coaches, like, okay, this can go like, I could say yes, and try to add value in any way that I can or get on the field, or I could say no and say, no, I'm only in quarterback. I've never done this.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, I'm not saying no, like that, that never even hit my mind.
Yeah.
And so Wednesday practice, I was on scout team, like kickoff and kickoff return and whatever. And then the next day I go in Thursday and it's like, okay, you're starting on kickoff and you're starting on kickoff return and then you're starting on punt return. And I was like, what the heck, And so we played Carolina that week and I ended up having 2 special teams tackles. And
what'd that feel like?
I guess like surreal, I didn't really know how to feel about it because I'd never played special teams. Like it was honestly like, it was a little bit embarrassing because when they like had me starting on Thursday before a game, I stayed after practice with our defensive coaches to go through tackling drills because like I'd never done that,
Yeah.
Yeah. And so like, I'm in a red jersey, and so I stick out like a sore thumb, and all of my teammates are like watching me go through tackling drills, and I'm like, what am I doing, bro? Like, anyways, and so then the game came, and one, it was a ton of fun, right? It was the first time in the
You're
NFL.
on the field.
I'm on the field.
Yeah.
I got a jersey, like I'm, in it, and I still remember like how excited my teammates were when they saw that I had like made a tackle.
It's got to be so endearing to everybody. You know what I mean? Because I think about like this leadership principle, like of being like stepping in and doing whatever it takes. I think about David Nealman, going and serving people, like literally going through and serving people on a flight, and they're like the CEO. And so there's got to be an element of that of like, it is a quarterback. This is like out of any of the positions in football, it's for sure the most high profile.
Yeah.
I'm willing to go play special and not like play, like I'm going to go make tackles. I'm going to go be a gun. I'm going to go. And it kind of was like the start of like this thing where all of a sudden you're lighting up special teams. Like you were a weapon.
It was wild, man. It was wild.
And so talk to me about the highlight of that first year. Like what's the moment that first year where you're like, what is happening?
Well, I think that first game, again, when we talk about this idea of having moments, like that first game, I had moments where I was like, I can do this. I can play in this league, and it's like I had talked to so many coaches that talk about this idea of having that moment of like, you belong here, and I also think, my perspective has like also forever been changed on leadership style, having played with Coach Payton and Coach Westhoff.
Yeah.
And it was, man, these guys had no business like saying, let's put this quarterback
the creativity,
special teams.
That's one that I think about, the parable of the sower. And you take these seeds and you throw them out, and the same seed on different soil, it just doesn't take root.
Yeah.
And I think about your life and your career, and you're kind of always going to be connected to Sean Payton.
For sure.
You know what I mean? Like those coaches and their creativity to think outside of the box. I mean, if you're within the box, it's who's a linebacker, who's a corner, who's somebody that's spent their life tackling. You're not grabbing a third string quarterback and saying, this is our starter. You know what I mean? So there's an element of, and they figured out how to do that your whole career. I think about other people that maybe, I don't want to say had your skill set, but had things like you, ability to be more dynamic as an athlete that never had a career.
Yeah.
Partially because you don't have a coach.
Look, there's a lot of people that I owe a lot of like thanks and gratitude to, throughout my career and family, my wife, but like Sean and Mike Westhoff and these guys, like, man, they took care of me.
They're your boys.
They're my boys. And this is what I was going to say about them, that I realized the power of like believing in somebody.
Yeah.
And and then like, and really believing in them, right? There's a difference in like saying something like that, right? Like, dude, you can do this.
I'm gonna
like,
put you
like
on the field.
Like,
you're the starter.
I'm going to create an opportunity for you, you know? But the conversations was like, dude, our special teams coach was like, bro, you'll be fine. Like, just, you know, go do this, you know? But that was like really empowering to me.
Yeah.
Really empowering.
Like, these guys believe in me.
They believe in me.
Yeah.
Like, they know that I can do this. So like,
I don't know if there's like anything more beautiful in the world, period, than that process of a leader believing in somebody more than they believe in themselves.
Yeah.
That unlocks this potential, and vice versa. All of us have been that leader or can be that leader, but all of us have had that leader too.
Totally.
And I think when you point to that leader, and I, you know, we could spend a whole hour talking about it, but I can go through my life and there's 4 or 5 of them. I'm like, at this point, my dad, at this point, my high school coach, at this point, Todd, you know, believed in me more than I believed in myself. And I'd run through a wall for him. I was like, I didn't want to let him down. But you're having that at 26. You know, you're having that at the highest professional level in a very visible stage, like a public arena.
Yeah. Look, man, it taught me a lot about leadership, you know, that I hadn't learned before or hadn't seen before. And that was a super valuable and important lesson for me as a parent.
Yeah.
You know, like Emily and I have these conversations all the time, you know, about this is what I want to do for our kids.
Yeah.
You know, how do you bottle this up and give this to them?
Yeah.
You know,
man, that's special.
But I would say that was, you know, the highlight my rookie year.
You started seeing snaps on offense too.
Yeah, 2018 was a super, super fun year, where now all of a sudden Sean, you know, had this special teams thing, but then he was like, oh,
what else can we do?
What else can we do? Like, let's start doing some zone read stuff. And, you know, and then it's just like steamrolled from there. And we talk about like pressure and expectations and like trying to manage all that. I remember those times where the first time I was getting like a zone read call at quarterback, you know, I was like, if this doesn't go well, like I'm not going to get more of these opportunities, you know, like so you want to talk about trying to make it in the NFL and like, yeah, man, like this, you better make sure this goes well.
This experiment, we're going to see how this plays out.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And fortunately, like it did. I remember the first time I did it, I was like, I pulled it. I shouldn't have. It was a terrible read, but like I made a man miss, and I think it was like a 40 or 50 yard gain, you know, that
and
we just made it work.
Let's go.
Sean was all fired up. But again, I think the underlying principle here has been like, man, when you have a leader that believes in you, that then creates opportunities for you, like that changes you. Yeah. You know, and that changed me.
Talk to me about like the maturation as a professional from coming into the league to where you're at today. What's different from day one till today?
Man, that's a great question. I think my story is probably a little bit unique, having, you know, served a mission. I was a 26-year-old rookie, you know, and kudos to Drew. Like Drew never one time like did anything as far as like hazing the rookie. Like I still remember like he was telling guys to like leave me alone. He was like, dude, he's a 26-year-old rookie that's like served a mission, leave him alone. You know,
he had your back.
He had my back from day one.
Because rookies have it hard, right?
Yeah, rookie's a tough year. Like your rookie year is a tough year. I think maybe the respect that I have, certainly the respect I have for the game has changed. You know, when I look at, you know, somebody like Drew or somebody like Tom or somebody that's just played for 10, 13 years and have like been really, really good for a really long time. I think as I look at my career, I think of the things that, you know, that I've learned that's gone into it. And it really is like, it requires all of you, you know, physically, mentally, emotionally. Like if you're going to be successful, in this league. Like it takes everything.
We talked the other day, and it's hard for you when the season ends.
It's really hard.
Just because you're so committed and so structured, and then you're not.
Yeah.
And it's almost like there's this void or this like.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about this too. Like it's hard for me if I don't feel like I'm progressing.
Yeah.
You know, like what am I doing to like add value to me as a person?
And I'm sure on the football side, there's a lot of stuff within your control.
For sure.
It's like I can move forward.
Yeah.
In the game plan, in my fitness, in my prep. Like there's a lot of stuff that you can optimize.
And there's also, you know, I think the hard thing for me, right, is every week you're playing a new opponent that's different scheme, different personnel, right? So it's not like, hey, you work in private equity, right? And you kind of have a playbook that works, you know? You got different key indicators that you look at. You're looking at their, you know, earnings, EBITDA, like all this stuff, right? And we are looking at similar stuff, but dude, you have to start over every single week.
You got to go bottoms up.
You got to like watch all the same film because it's different scheme. They play differently. It's different personnel. Like, you know, so I look at my week and I'm like, my days are planned to the minute, you know, like when I have meetings, when I'm at practice, like, and I work every weekend.
Which is probably easy. Like for me, working hard is actually easy.
I love the routine.
Yeah. Like the hard work isn't the problem. It's like when that structure changes, that's where you're like.
That's what's hard for me.
Yeah.
When I go from having all of that, and in the NFL, it's like, okay, so we were a game short of the playoffs this year. So we were kind of watching games Sunday. Well, it didn't work out in our favor. So Monday morning I go in, we have exit physicals, we have exit interviews. And by 12 o'clock on Monday, like I'm done.
Yeah.
Like my phone doesn't ring. Coaches aren't calling me. There's nothing on my schedule,
wow.
You know? So, you know, the first couple of weeks, it's a different, you know, transition. And I try to find things each off season that like, I feel like I'm adding value to me as a person, as a husband, as a, you know, like father to my kids. And from a business standpoint, like I try to find ways to add value.
Yeah. Highlight in the NFL when you think about like that game or that moment, like what's the one that you look back and you're just like, oh my gosh, this is.
Yeah. I mean, I think, the 2018 season was one of the funnest times I've had, like in football period. We were the number 1 seed that year. Our season ended in absolute heartbreak, you know,
controversy.
Yeah. And, you know, that's still like a really hard thing to sit and think about, truthfully. But I had like such good friends on that roster, and like we were really, really good, and such an unselfish like team, you know, like just everything you want was there. So that's like a season that really sticks out in my mind. I think for me individually, like my first NFL start, it was like a surreal moment for me, you know, like when you're a little kid, you're writing, what do you want to do when you grow up? I was writing, like, I want to play in the NFL, you know? And so that was a really humbling week for me, where I, you know, was able to kind of take a step back and reflect upon everything that had happened to this point to get me where I was at that week as I led to getting ready to play and start against the Atlanta Falcons. And then the game like went really well, truthfully. We won, and I had played pretty well. And I still remember after that game, like I had so much family that came down to that game.
Everybody's there.
Everybody came.
Yeah.
And it was like at the drop of a hat, like they found out I was starting, and all of a sudden
it's game
like,
on.
Let's go, you know? And they all showed up, and it was kind of a weird week for me because I had gotten hit, and I had hit-induced vertigo, so I wasn't feeling great like anytime I'd laid down, like the whole room would go spinning. So there was just a lot that week. And I had family that was like fasting for me, like to get over this, you know. And I still remember following that game, like the amount of like gratitude,
love
that I felt. Like I was like emotional in the press conference after the game. As I think about my parents, coaches, like college teammates, coaches, my wife, you know, like the list is so long of people that have helped and influenced me to be there, you know. So that's the moment that sticks out in my mind.
Talk to him about Emily.
I mean, Emily is as good a person that you could find, you know. Yeah, you're asking the tough questions here. You're gonna get me emotional, but I don't do anything without running everything by her. You know, as I think about my dreams and goals, and like I've never really had to question anything or like, hey, should we be doing this? She's like all in all the time, you know. And as I think about who I want to be raising our kids and who do I want like our kids to be influenced by, like Emily's the greatest person that I know, you know, the most supportive wife that you could ever ask for. And she is good to her core.
Because you guys have always just had like a special marriage, like from early, from day one. You've just always kind of been a team.
Yeah, she's special. And you know, I don't know that I like believe this is the case, you know, that there's a person for each person, you know, but I feel really strongly that I was supposed to find her.
She's your person.
I do feel really strongly about that.
Yeah.
You know, and she, you know, you want to think about like our first few years of marriage. So we dated in 2013. We got married April of 14. 2014, I break my leg and tear the ligaments in my ankle. And it was like Emily there left to pick up the pieces, you know?
Just seeing you at like your lowest moment, like as hard as it gets.
Yeah. 2015, she goes to the game at Nebraska and I tear my Liz Frank, you know? And this was our first 2 years of marriage. And she'd spent more time being my nurse and like my therapist, you know? And then, you know, 2016, last game of the season, I ripped my tricep tendon off the bone, you know? So our first 3 years of marriage was like her
crazy adversity.
Was her like nursing me back. So look, without her, I wouldn't be where I'm at, you know? There's no doubt about that. So she's the best thing that's ever happened to me.
I mean,
you know?
when and that family's so special, like the Nixons, like they're just all special, you know, but you see like, and I admire this. Like I did a podcast earlier today, with Chels.
Oh, nice.
We're talking about our marriage. And you don't like realize it until you talk about it out loud of like, hey, what are the habits? What are the rituals? What are the things that we do to make a special marriage? You know, like how do we communicate, intimacy, you know, time, all these things. And you just, you go there and you just realize like my life would be a lot different if I wasn't married to this person, and like how much they've been there. But I think about your career in particular. It's just non-traditional.
Yeah.
I mean, you guys live in New Orleans half the year. You live here half the year. Yeah. There's times where it's like you have nothing but like you're so structured. It's everything. But then you probably just get like dropped on, or like, hey, I'm here.
Yeah.
You know, like,
Yeah.
and that's a different type of.
Look, it's an adjustment for sure. You know, I truly, honestly feel like, look, we've been through some hard things for sure, you know, and the injuries and stuff. And, you know, I tore my other Liz Frank in the NFL, and like we just had a baby, and, you know, where it's like we're trying to navigate that. Like, but, you know, Emily and I always talk like, man, I feel like I could freaking tackle the world like with her by my side.
Yeah.
You know, and you want to talk about like a real trial is like, if not being good with your spouse.
Yeah.
Like would
that's just
break
never
me,
like, it's always been home base for you. It's always been safe
like
place.
a safe place and a safe spot. And
what do you think that is? Like what, you know, what do you do to make it special, and what does she do?
You know, we talk a lot about love languages, and I think understanding each other is like a really important thing. Like, I know what her love language is, and she knows what my love language is. And I think at the root of everything that we do, like, she knows that I would never like intentionally ever do something to hurt her.
Yeah.
And she knows that. And I know that about her, that she would never do that.
We were talking about that same exact thing today. Because like when me and Chelsea fight, like assuming good intent usually fixes stuff.
Totally.
You know what I mean? Because like if you're assuming the good, you can work through the mistakes.
Sure.
But if you assume negativity, it just can spiral. You know what I mean?
Totally.
And so I think that as a core is just so important.
And I think that we know that about each other. And I think like we talk very kindly to each other.
It's special.
You know, and I think that's really important in a marriage, and we try to do that. And, you know, as I mentioned, she's just good to her core.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that's an important thing. I think it's important to be kind and talk kind to your spouse.
Yeah. Talk to me about faith. How does God fit into the mix? You know,
I mean, it's everything. You know, I don't. It is everything. It's hard to think about my life without thinking about God. You know, I'm trying to find a way to articulate that, but I know that God is there, you know, and I know that like he has a plan for me. I know he has a plan for Emily, and I know he has a plan for us and our family and our kids. And like that is just like to our core.
It's always been core too, though, right? I mean,
it always has been.
Probably a lot of pressure not to go on a mission.
There was a lot of pressure to not go on a mission. You know, I remember I would go into the weight room where one of our coaches was the coach, or English class where our head coach was coaching. And there was like, you know, especially a few coaches that were like, had a reason for me not to go every single day, you know, and why I should go play football instead.
Yeah.
And as like a naive, like 18-year-old growing up, like, and I kind of alluded to this before, but I have felt so fortunate to like be where I'm at. When I was in high school, I attributed, you know, my ability to do these things to God.
Yeah. You've
know?
always felt like it's a stewardship.
I always felt that way.
Yeah.
And as a naive, like 18-year-old, like a mission was like a non-negotiable for me.
You just knew
I was going to go. And it's a little bit silly, I guess, to say this, but as an 18-year-old, I was like, I'm going to go give back, man. I'm going to go serve a mission, because I recognize like how like fortunate I have been.
Yeah.
You know, and the reason I say it's like silly to say is because the growth that took
You're
place
the one
as
that
a
gets
missionary,
all, yeah.
you get it all.
Yeah.
You know? And so my perspective on that has obviously changed, but I will say I've had too many experiences to let me know that God is there and that He's.
But is it like
me.
you talk to God? Like this?
I mean, I'm a man of prayer for sure, but
this fascinates me because like there's times where I hear voices. Like it doesn't happen much.
Yeah.
But there's times where it's like, do this, or like some of the most simple ones are just like, I'm so proud of you. And like those are the moments, like when I think about my faith, there's a handful of them that I'm like, oh my gosh, like I just talked to God. And they're like, I warehouse them and I have them that it's just like anytime, you know, when I'm going through stuff, my experience has just been so different, you know? And so I was talking to Astrid Tuminis, and she's talking about her faith, and she's like, I talk to God. Like I'll talk out loud, and my kids will hear me and they'll make fun of me and they'll be like, I'm here, God, you know? And I was cracking up, but I'm like, you know, and so is it something that it's like, you know, are you having experiences where you're like, I know I'm guided right now. Like, I know that this is the right, you know what I mean? Like
yeah.
Or is it just a general?
No, I think, and I was kind of saying this earlier, I've just had too many experiences that let me know that God is aware of me.
Yeah.
And that I look at my life and how I ended up at BYU, and I had a very special and sacred experience to let me know that Emily was supposed to be my wife.
Oh my gosh, that's the good stuff.
And so I look at my life and how I ended up at BYU, and I know that like big part of that was because I was supposed to find Emily.
Yeah.
You know? And I look at having the opportunity to be a flag bearer at BYU and play quarterback there, and
matters to you.
It matters to me.
You're proud of it.
And I've been able to, like, you know, I think have an impact on people as a result of that, you know? And as I look back at the things that have happened in my life and what's led me to like being right here, right now.
Yeah.
I just cannot deny that God's hand has been doing all of this.
No, especially as that, man. I think about you're like, who would you want to represent, you know, the school and the faith? And I think you have been a good steward. Like when I you know, we're proud of you. Like, you know, it's Sunday and I'm in church, but I'm watching the game. You know, it's like, you know, and we're all just, you know, and it's not just you. It's you're watching Puka and you're watching, you know, you're watching all the guys who are in the league, you know, the Fred Warners, and you're cheering for them, you know, because you're cheering for them in college. But I think, you know, that idea of stewardship, that it's not mine, that I'm not entitled to it, you know, that all these gifts, you know, they're sacred trusts.
Yeah.
And I've been given 2 talents or 5 talents, but I'm going to return double. Like I'm going to turn these into something more than what I was given. I think, yeah, from the outside looking in, you know, I think you operating with that philosophy of stewardship, I just think you've been a good steward, you know, and it's fun to watch. I admire, there's so many traits that you have that I admire about you, but those, you know, those are some of the most admirable or the most attractive. Is kind of the opposite of pride. You know, pride would say, this is mine. And that there is just kind of a feeling of, I'm going to do the best I can. I'm going to go see how far I can take it. You know what I mean? So fun to watch.
Really kind of you.
Yeah.
Appreciate that.
Before we finish up, who are your heroes? Like when you're looking back and say, these are the people, you know, who are the 2 or 3 in my life that's like, this is my Mount Rushmore. These are the ones that like, I wouldn't be Taysom without.
Yeah, I mean, family's kind of everything, you know. So as we started this conversation, as I look at how I ended up here, I look at my parents, you know, and I look at their upbringing that they had and upbringing that they provided for us and the opportunities that they gave me as a result of that. Like, you know, we have talked about this idea before in the past, but I had a coach that talked about, what's the greatest compliment that I can give you as a player, and I've thought a lot about that. His answer was that you overachieved. And I look at my parents and I'm like, man, they are the definition of overachievers.
Yeah.
And so they're my heroes for sure. And older siblings, being the youngest of four, like I had the opportunity to see them kind of navigate a lot of the things that I went through later in life. And I was able to lean on their experience and how they went through it. And without them, there's no way that I'd be where I'm at, So those early years, building the foundation and the structure of who I am, like they're my heroes.
Yeah. I love your story. And we've talked about this. I think your best chapters are in the future and not in the past. I think there's like next stages of the journey that are going to be so fun to watch. I think about these leaders, these Steve Youngs or these Drew Breeses or these Magic Johnsons or Shaquille O'Neals or these different people the Kobe's that had so much success in this specialized field. But then they took those success characteristics and applied them, to the business field. And I'm excited to see what you go do, because I know that, those characteristics, those walk-on, those undrafted free agent, make the team characteristics, the play specialty, like that drive, that hunger, it's going to be fun to see the next chapters in the book. So thanks for coming in, brother. I love it.
Thanks for having me.
Yep.
Thank you.